Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to try to get you through all the muscles of the face, head, and potentially even the trunk. Um, as far as your follow-alongs are concerned, I'd really like your follow-along for this one to be your muscles terms to know list. So if you have that, that'll be great. If you don't, pause the video and grab that because that's going to be a lot of help for you today. So we're going to start getting into actually naming muscles and learning their actions. And there's a few terms you're going to want to know before we jump into naming these. The first is kind of the no-duh term. It's not that special, really. It's the primary mover. That's going to be the muscle we're talking about. The major responsibility for a certain movement, if you wanted to flex at the elbow, for example, this could be biceps brachii. Now, there are some terms you're going to want to know to help him out. There's the antagonist, which if you've read like plays or something along those lines, the antagonist is the bad guy. The antagonist is a muscle that opposes or reverses the primary mover. And so if biceps brachii flexes the elbow, triceps brachii would be its antagonist because it extends the elbow. So a muscle that works against the muscle we're concerned with is the antagonist. Now there's also synergists. You might have heard the words like synergy or some nonsense like that, which is like we all work together so happily and blah blah blah. A synergist is a muscle that helps that primary mover to do the movement. So if biceps brachii is flexing the elbow, brachioradialis is helping it do that. You can think of these sometimes in like a weightlifting kind of arena. People will call these stabilizers to prevent rotation, that sort of stuff. Synergists help primary movers. Antagonists do the opposite job of primary movers. So when we name skeletal muscles, sometimes the name themselves can give you clues about what that muscle might look like or even do. The direction of muscle fibers can be something we take into consideration when we name muscles. For example, rectus means straight. There are also muscles named oblique, and oblique is a reference to the direction that the muscle fibers run. So that can help us out. Also, the relative size of the muscle. Maximus would be a large muscle, right? Minimus would be a small muscle. So size, direction, all of these things can be useful when we name muscles. A lot of times we're going to work with the location of the muscle, and that can be really beneficial. A lot of muscles are named for the bones they're attached to. The temporalis muscle sits over the temporal bone in your skull. The frontalis muscle sits over the frontal bone in your skull. So a lot of this stuff that you've taken the time to learn earlier in the year is now going to help you out quite a bit. And sometimes we'll name muscles based on the number of origins. Some of these originate from multiple little cartilaginous tendons, or the muscle separates into three areas before it ends at the tendon. And one example of that is the triceps, 3 heads, biceps, 2 heads. It refers to the structure of the muscle and how many origins that muscle has. So there's lots of different things we take into consideration when we name a muscle. Sometimes it's the location of the muscle, origin, and insertion, and those are a little harder to learn because of the length of the name, but I really like them. For example, there's a muscle that runs down your neck called sternocleidomastoid. It's a long name, but it tells you everything you need to know. Sternum, sterno, cleido, clavicle, mastoid, mastoid process of the temporal bone. So sternocleidomastoid, you know exactly where the muscle starts, exactly where it ends, and the space it spans. Hard to name, but the name is very, very useful. Sometimes the shape of the muscle can play a role in how we name it. The deltoid, for example, kind of covers the top part of your shoulder like so, and then runs down to what you might recall as the deltoid tuberosity down on the humerus, and it looks like a triangle. And you'll also recall from chemistry that a triangle is the Greek symbol for delta, which is, of course, the change in temperature or change in something along those lines. And so sometimes we'll name them after the shapes, and then that can be very useful. And then finally, actions of these muscles. Flexor carpi radialis, for example. Well, what's it do? It flexes the wrist. That's what flexor carpi means. Well, where is it located? Along the radius. We can combine the actions with the bones they're near and get very, very logical names. Vice versa, there's also extensor carpi radialis. What's it do? It extends the carpal bones, extends the wrist. You guys likely just did that in a lab or will very soon when you lifted that weight up with your wrist. And an extensor carpi radialis would tell you what it does, where it is, that kind of stuff. It's really pretty useful. So now we get to the meat and potatoes, the parts you guys have all been waiting for. If you take the skin and the fat off of a human face, this is what you're going to see. This guy right here, it's called the epicranial aponeurosis, or sometimes the cranial aponeurosis. And you guys already know that that's a broad sheet-like tendon that covers a big area. So the top of your head really doesn't have any muscle at all. It has an aponeurosis, and then it has skin and hair follicles, things of that nature. But we do have some muscles that you're going to need to learn along with their action. So if you have your terms to know list, now's the time. This muscle right here is called the frontalis. Now that's the frontal bone of your skull, so it's pretty easy to name. Now bear in mind, all a muscle can do is get shorter. So if we got an aponeurosis up here, and I contract these muscles, the muscle fibers run this direction, they're going to get shorter, and they're going to pull this direction. So the action for frontalis I'd like you to know is that it raises your eyebrows. If you raise your eyebrows, that is because you are contracting the muscle on your forehead. The next bone I want you to know is right here. Again, great name. It's called the temporalis. Well, you guys know it. This is a temporal bone, and so that makes it pretty easy for you there. You know that the temporalis has a tendon that runs straight down here to the mandible. So if you contract the temporalis and it pulls these muscle fibers up to become shorter, it's going to help you close your jaw. And you can do this if you put your fingers just above and in front of your ear and you chew. You can feel the muscle on the side of your head actually contract a little bit, which is kind of cool. So back here, teeny tiny muscle called occipitalis. And again, it attaches right here at this cranial aponeurosis. There's not a lot it can do, really, because if it shortens, it's attached to bone here, but it can extend the scalp, which means some people, not me, can contract this and actually move their scalp back just a little bit. Now I'm guessing here, and I could be wrong, but if you know those guys or gals who can wiggle their ears without touching them, I think that might be the muscle that does it, because it pulls this, that pulls the skin back, that wiggles the ear. That's my guess. I might be wrong, but I think that's how it works. So if any of you guys can do that, let me know in class, and we'll watch your we'll watch your scalp while you wiggle your ears and see what happens. All right, sternocleidomastoid. Mastoid process is right here on the temporal bone. Sternocleidomastoid is going to tuck under platysma right here and run down to the sternum and the clavicle down here. So if you contract this side, it's going to turn your neck. If you contract the other side, it's going to turn your neck that way. So these two guys work together to stabilize our head, to turn our neck left and right, and also to help us look down at an angle. If you look down to the right with your whole head, or down to the left, that's sternocleidomastoid helping you move your head. Next muscle's right here. An orb is a circle. An orbicularis oculi is the muscle that's circular around your eye. That's what oculi means. You know, ocular means eye, orb means circle, orbicularis oculi, the circular muscle around your eye. Again, all muscles can do is get shorter and relax. So when it gets shorter, it will actually close your eye. That's how you close your eye, or wink, that sort of stuff. Next one we have to find is zygomaticus. This one's a little tricky. This little muscle right here ends right there. This little muscle right here ends up here. Can you guess why it's named zygomaticus? What's that bone right there? It's the zygomatic bone, right? From the last chapter. So the two muscles that stretch down from the zygomatic bone are called the zygomaticus. Now they terminate right down here at the corner of the mouth. So if you contract those two muscles right there, they will make you smile. They'll pull the corner of your cheek up. Well, rather, I guess the corner of your lip, I suppose I should say. They'll pull that up, and it will cause you to smile. That's what zygomaticus does. Next one's a little trickier because it's a deep muscle. A lot of our attention in high school anatomy works on these superficial muscles, But deep to a few of these other muscles lies this little flat muscle called the buccinator. And the buccinator is going to allow you to tense your cheeks. If you whistle, you actually suck your cheeks in just a little bit to do that. And trumpet players, for example, would need to do this, and they have this buccinator muscle that pulls those cheeks in just a little bit. Next, orbicularis oris. Again, this is nice because oral refers to mouth, orbicularis is circular muscle, so the circular muscle around the mouth is orbicularis oris. If you contract these, they get smaller and it makes you pucker your lips. That's what orbicularis oris does. Finally, we get this really big muscle right here. It's called the masseter. The masseter is probably the primary muscle that helps you chew food. So there's your masseter, very near to the mastoid process, of course, and it runs down here to the mandible, which is very cool for its job. So next thing we have is this long sheet-like muscle, and it's kind of all over the place. Like it's all over your mandible, it's at the end of the mandible here, your chin, and it runs in this flat sheet all the way down to your chest, to kind of where your sternum and clavicle are. And we call this muscle the platysma. And the platysma allows you to depress your mandible, so to open your mouth basically, and also to pull down the corners of your mouth out here just a little bit to make you frown. And you can also contract it, I'll show you in class, to make the neck very broad, and that's one thing the platysma does as well. So then we get back here, and this one's kind of tricky because I throw him in with face and neck muscles, but really it's like, he's kind of a back muscle, he's kind of a shoulder muscle, he's all over the place. This guy right here that runs all the way up to that occipital bone is called the trapezius. The trapezius does a lot. It elevates the scapula, so it can actually lift your scapula up, like if you shrug your shoulders. It can also adduct your scapula, so pull them together on your back. If you're doing like a seated row in a weight room sort of setting, and you pull the cord or handle or whatever towards your chest, to do that motion, the scapula actually kind of rotate medially and squeeze towards each other a little bit, and the trapezius is responsible for that motion, or at least a decent portion of it. And then it can also depress the scapula, so to push your scapula down. Think about, I think, the final motion that's required to complete a pull-up, a good pull-up, not a chin-up, a real pull-up, you know, with your arms pretty far apart kind of pull-up. To actually get yourself up over that bar, your scapulae are going to be rotated down just a little and squeezed together. And the trapezius is doing that as well. So that's your face and your neck muscles. And that's really what you're going to need to be able to know for those, along with their actions. So there's a little review. All the things I told you. And I do have Quizlets over these as well, which is nice. So let's go to the next diagram. I think we can get this done in a reasonable time. Clavicle, the sternum with the manubrium body and the xiphoid process. Any guesses as to what these might be right here? Hopefully, based on their location, you guess sternocleidomastoid, because you'd be right. So here's the deltoid. The deltoid is on the outside of the shoulder. And I've actually got him as arms. So I don't know if he's going to be on this little quiz section or not, but we'll throw him in there. He's in the picture. Why not? The deltoid is going to abduct the arm. Okay, so to pull the arm away from your body or to lift the arm away from your body. That's the deltoid. All right. Pectoralis major is also, it's kind of one of those things. Do you call it arm? Do you call it trunk? I don't really know where we're cutting these apart as far as splitting this all up. That can be kind of tricky, but the pectoralis major is going to adduct your humerus, and it's going to medially rotate your humerus. And so that's kind of tough because it has a couple of actions. If you take the pectoralis major away, we can't really see it. I wonder if I have another picture of pectoralis minor. No, darn it. I'll get you a picture in class. If you take this away, pectoralis major, there's 3 little muscles running down right here, attached to the ribs. Those are called pectoralis minor. All right? So I told you we'd focus on the trunk more. So I'm going to leave this arm stuff for next time, and we're going to focus on the trunk. These little guys here, if you're familiar with knives, the part of the knife that looks like tiny teeth is called a serrated knife. Serrations are these little tooth-like muscles, and we call these serratus anterior, or the forward-facing serrated muscles. I don't think I have those on your terms to know list for a function. I do have them. Abduct and rotate the scapula. So they're these little finger-like muscles that run outside of someone's ribs. And in order to abduct and rotate the scapula, if you think about a boxer who throws a punch, they generally have really, really big serratus anterior muscles. Because in order to make a punch rotate and extend, they are abducting the scapula and rotating the arm. So they're doing both of the actions that are going to make serratus anterior work. So that's one that I want you to know. Now there's a few layers of muscles. This guy right here is called the abdominal aponeurosis, broadsheet-like tendon. Pectoralis major we can see here. And now we have to look at some of these abdominal muscles. Now, the outermost layer of abdominal muscle is called the external oblique. Now, that's going to compress the abdomen, and it's going to assist forced expiration, so to exhale. If you contract these, it's going to compress the abdomen in this way, and it can also help you rotate just a little. Now, telling these all apart can be tricky, but think of it this way. External oblique, the muscle fibers run in the same direction as they were if you were to like put your hand in your coat pocket. Your fingers would be running this direction. Internal oblique, they run the exact opposite direction. And of course, their name is oblique because they're not running straight up and down or straight side to side. They're running at this weird angle. So internal oblique is going to run up and down at this angle. Its action rather, is going to be a synergist with the external oblique to help it rotate the trunk. Now, if we cut one layer more, we get to what people commonly call their abs, which is really only a fourth of them, but that's okay. Rectus abdominis. You can tell from these cartilaginous lines, this is the six-pack that most people are concerned with. So rectus abdominis is going to flex the vertebral column. Think doing a sit-up. It'll also compress the abdomen. And the transverse abdominis is going to aid with forced expiration, or contracting that abdominal cavity. So there's your abdominal muscles that you're going to need to know. Cool? External oblique, internal oblique, rectus abdominis, which means straight, transverse abdominis, which means across, serratus anterior, pectoralis major, and you've got the trunk done. So that's the front of the trunk. We'll leave the arm for next time. Let's look at the back. The back's quite a bit trickier. We leave these alone for right now. We just call them erector spinae. They are muscles that stabilize your spine and stabilize your back. We don't name all of them in high school. You could, but I don't make you. So here's the occipital bone. Here's sternocleidomastoid from last time. Here's trapezius. When you look at the direction of the muscle fibers, you might recognize this as the scapular spine. When you look at the direction of the muscle fibers, hopefully this makes sense now why the trapezius elevates the scapula. It also adducts the scapula, and it also depresses the scapula. It does all of those jobs because of the amount of distance that trapezius actually covers. This guy over here is called lat dorsi. Latissimus dorsi, people commonly call them the lats. It wraps around and inserts on the humerus. And latissimus dorsi is one that I'm pretty certain is on your terms to know list. Its job is to adduct the humerus. Now, if you just look at here and you say I have traps and I have lats, the back is a very simple place. If you pull the trap away, the back becomes a very complicated place. But it's logical. This muscle here can only get shorter, and it's called levator scapulae. How great is that? Elevates the scapula. It's function is literally in its name, which I think is great. This guy over here is called rhomboid major. Rhomboid major is going to adduct the scapula because look at its muscle fibers. Like what else could it do? It attaches to the medial border of the scapula right here. It attaches to your vertebrae. It's certainly not going to pull your vertebrae over to your scapula. It's going to pull your scapula over to your vertebrae. So that's called rhomboid. There is a rhomboid major and minor. That's this guy right here. But if you just know him as rhomboid, I think that's all it's on your terms to know list. Yep. So if I show you him or him, rhomboid minor, rhomboid major, you can call them rhomboid. It's fine. Know they're rhomboid. Know that they adduct the scapula. Again, it's named after its shape. A rhombus is another name for a diamond. And if you look at the shape of the muscle, you can kind of get, that diamond picture out of it. It's not perfect, but it's there. So then here's two others that get a little bit tricky. And maybe we should do these two first now that I think about it. Let's go ahead and do that. This was the scapular spine, right? So above the scapular spine, this fellow here is called supraspinatus. Above the spine. That's what it means. Its function is going to be to abduct the arm because all it can do is get shorter. It's going to pull this way. It's going to help lift that humerus out away from the body. That's supraspinatus. Now, below it is this big old muscle right underneath the scapular spine, and that's called infraspinatus, name meaning below the spine. Now this one's a little trickier because look where it inserts right here on my guess, I don't know, probably the greater tubercle of the humerus. And when it contracts, it's going to pull this way. And so it's going to laterally rotate the arm. Does that make sense? If not, I'll show you what that looks like in class because it's hard to show you on a flipped class video. Sorry. So there's two more muscles, very small little guys right here and right here, and they're called teres major and teres minor. Now, teres major runs right here, and it's going to adduct the arm when it contracts. Teres minor runs in the same direction as infraspinatus, so teres minor is going to assist infraspinatus in lateral rotation of that humerus. And so with those, I think we're almost done with the face and the core. Let's take a look. Yep. Linea alba. Sure, we can do that. Right down your abdomen runs a white line. That white line is called linea alba. It's cartilage. It has no action because it's not a muscle. Doesn't mean it's not important, it just doesn't have an action. And with that, that is every muscle on your terms to know list. We'll leave the arms for now. Just trunk, core, head, back, those sorts of things. You can call all these guys erector spinae, and I'll be happy with that. And we'll stop there. So thanks for your time.